Good evening and welcome everyone to our Transitioning to B Square's New Assessment Frameworks webinar. Counting down the days like everyone else till the end of term. We are almost there. So this evening I'm going to go through the new frameworks and how to transition to them. So this webinar is generally going to run in two sections like our previous ones, with the main presentation followed by a Q&A session for around 15 minutes at the end. Everyone's microphone is currently muted, so you can all hear me nice and clearly. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat window. You'll see in the bottom of the webinar control panel, or ask them at the end. For registering, everyone who's registered for this webinar will receive a recording, so you can watch this later as much as you want. And also you will see in the side panel are a number of handouts. So there's 5 handouts for you to access, and again these will be accessible afterwards. And at the end, as you leave, there will be a short survey and just ask you to please complete the survey so we can help you more. So this webinar is designed for those who already know about our new frameworks and have already made a purchase or are looking to make a purchase. I'm only going to touch on the new frameworks slightly. I'm not going to go into any of the background detail. We did a webinar in June on Are You Ready for Removal of P-levels, which will go into more information. So that's a good watch, which you can get to from our blog. So in this webinar, I'm going to go over some background information, so our old assessment frameworks, the new assessment frameworks, and then I'm going to go straight into the frequently asked questions, because generally there's lots of questions everyone have, and I think if we can get them out of the way first, we can then look at the other bits that people want to know. So the old versus new: what information can transfer, what information does not transfer, how does it all transfer, and then just the overview at the end. So the old assessment frameworks. So what we mean by that is, if in connecting steps on the sidebar you go to choose a curriculum, it says P-levels and national curriculum, or P-levels or national curriculum. There are actually 3 different versions. Generally you'll be on the latest version. There are a few schools who haven't updated and maybe on an earlier version, but the majority of our schools are on the 2014. If you are not sure which version you're on, you can always give us a call and we can tell you. And the 2014 will be the easiest to transfer. The reason being is between 2000 and 2007 there were a few changes, but between 2007 and 2014 there were some really big changes, and it's from that one we've moved to the new framework. So if you're on an older version, once we've done the transferring of data, I really would recommend going in and having a look, because there'll be big changes. And not as much data does transfer if you're on the older frameworks. The other way you can check is what you're using is if you go into connecting, if you're the administrator, if you go into connecting steps and go to system administration and assessment files, you will see which frameworks you are available and which ones you're using. And as I said, if you're not sure, please get in contact. So a very quick overview of the new framework. So hopefully a lot of you have seen this infographic before. What we're generally looking at as the 3 frameworks in the middle. These are our post-Rochford or post-removal of P-level frameworks. So at the bottom, for the children not yet engaged in subject-specific learning, we have engagement steps. For children engaged in subject-specific learning, we have progression steps or primary steps. So we have 3 frameworks: the engagement steps for the lowest ability, and then progression steps and primary steps for those working above. So 3 new frameworks: engagement steps, not engaged; progression steps for those who engaged; and primary steps will be students engaged in subject-specific learning in a primary setting. So that will be mostly used by mainstream primary schools who want to use the same language for their SEN children as their non-SEN. And the other framework, which if you purchase progression steps or primary steps you will get, is one called standardized steps. So this is an additional framework which is completely free to those who buy in that, and what that does is the standardized steps is just the pre-key stage standards in their rawest forms. So as we've developed the content in progression steps and primary steps, we've embedded the pre-key stage standards within the content. So as you work through progression steps and as you work through primary steps, it will also have to be recording the achievements in standardized steps for you. So at the end of Key Stage 1 or Key Stage 2, you can see exactly where the children have got up to and what standard to report. So just a quick overview on engagement steps. So engagement steps, you can see on the right how the engagement steps compares to the old national curriculum P levels. So it covers from P1 up to P6. So it's for pupils not yet engaged in subject learning. It covers 4 broad areas of need, and it covers the 7 areas or aspects of engagement. So this is all still under review. So this will be fully confirmed by the government next year, ready to be brought in September 2019. But we've released it now because there's a big difference, and what we've developed is a huge improvement over what we had previously, and the feedback from schools have been really positive. So that's a quick overview, really quick overview of engagement steps. Next one, progression steps. So again, on the right, you can see how that converts. So it starts sort of the top of P4 and goes up to the old level 7. It covers all areas of 2014 primary curriculum, but what we've done is we've updated it and made sure it can be used by any age group. So what you will see on that progression step 10, you have content from Key Stage 3, so we have the areas. We've listened to feedback from schools on how to organise the content and any feedback on the way we've written things. So hopefully those using 2014 will see improvement. And as it says there, uses the pre-key standards as the level structure. So standards, steps 1 to 6, they are in line with the new pre-key stage standards. So it gives you a really good idea of the ability or the attainment level of those new pre-key stage standards. And it says there it covers a wide range of abilities and includes the end of key stage performance descriptors. So progression step 7, 8 and 9 are the working towards, working at, and greater depth. So you have those as well. So currently progression steps covers the cognition and learning. Over the next year or so, we are then going to be developing the communication, interaction, the social, emotional, mental health, and the sensory and physical. So it will cover all 4 areas of need. So with the primary steps, again, it covers all the 2014 curriculum. It's designed to be used in a primary school setting. The difference here is we have the first 3 pre-key stage standards, and then it moves on to the end of year outcomes. So if you're a primary school who want to use the language of working to, so year 1 you might have emerging, developing, secure. You can use that language within our frameworks. And it is a framework which can be used for all pupils. So it can be used for the mainstream pupils and the SEN pupils in a primary setting. So this gives you the overall comparison. So it's just a sideways version of looking at that same information. So you can see how standard 1 compares to the P levels all the way through. So it's working towards, working at in greater depth. You will see in the handouts, in one of the handouts in the sidebar, there is the B-squared assessment framework comparison chart, which I will bring up at the end so you can see. Has this, so it compares the old P levels and levels to the engagement steps, the progression steps, and the primary steps. So you get a good overview. And it's something you can just print out and share with a lot of teachers, because all this progression steps engagement will be new language to everyone, and it's going to take a while for everyone to kind of get their heads around it. So the frequently asked questions. The first one is, do schools automatically receive the new frameworks? Schools will need to purchase the frameworks. All existing schools will receive a discount. Please contact us for details. And the costings for each school will depend on when you purchased it. So some schools you purchased it in the last 6 months to a year will actually receive the upgrade for free because you've already paid for it. Other schools on 2014 curriculum will receive a bigger discount, and then those on the older curriculums will receive a smaller discount. So it depends on which areas you want, how many users. So please contact us if you'd like to know how much it is. Can I look at the new assessment frameworks before I transition? Once you've purchased the frameworks, you can look at them straight away. Also on our blog, under the removal of P levels, you will see samples of all the different frameworks. If you still haven't seen those, you get to have a look at what the frameworks look like. But unlike the transition from 2007 to 2014, where you couldn't look at them side by side, with the new frameworks, you can look at them side by side and any skills automatically transfer. So it's ready to view straight away. When are they all ready? They will be ready tomorrow. So everything will be start shipping tomorrow, and we'll be getting it all out to everyone as soon as possible. So if you have placed an order, we will get that out to you shortly. Next set of frequently asked questions is, when should we transition? My suggestion is in September. As you can look at both frameworks alongside each other, it's not such a big deal when you switch. What is a big deal is when you start using it. Generally, you'll all want to finish this year on the old framework, so you want to complete the year. You're looking at assessing and doing all your data on the P-levels national curriculum. You'll then spend the last week or two having a look at the new frameworks, making sure your data is ready to transition, and then you can either transition at the end of this term or at the start of the next term. So we'll be ready to start transitioning schools at the end of this week, beginning of next week. Biggest one I've been asked is, what will good progress look like? That's a big one that everyone's going to be asking, because they want to set targets in the autumn term. So what we're going to be working on over the summer, based on the work we did on the progression guidance to make it easier to work with and fairer and more reliable, we'll be converting that information into guidance for the progression steps. So you will know in September, where a child is on progression step 4, what will good progress look like. So at the start, it'll be basic information, but we will be doing work on that going forward to give a more accurate picture once we've got a year's worth of data. But we'll give you some guidance ready for the start of the term. This is going to be an interesting one. Can children be assessed on engagement steps and progression steps? The answer is you can assess children on both, but it wouldn't be the easiest. It will be too much work. So you've got to manage the workload. But what we have done is we have given an overlap between the two frameworks. So you can assess the engagement steps up to P6, and you can start on progression steps at P4. But I would recommend a transition period of when you're going to move from one to the other. Where you may want to use engagement steps with the progression steps is using the other areas of need. So within engagement steps, we have the P1 to P6 equivalent across the social, emotional, mental health, the sensory and or physical, and the communication interaction. And if you have children who may be engaged in subject-specific learning, but their SEMH may be lower, you can use the content within engagement steps to record where they are and track towards their EHCP targets. What information transfers into engagement steps? So as engagement steps is a brand new framework with brand new areas, brand new levels, we cannot transfer any completed levels in, but any skill they have in the old frameworks, which is in the new frameworks, will automatically transfer. So when you purchase engagement steps and you have the level summary, you will look on that screen, you'll see percentages showing this sort of transferred data. So my favorite assessment point, blinks defensively, which is in the early years physical development, English P11, is also in responsiveness on step 1. So all of that information will transfer as soon as you load on the engagement steps. So this is my interesting one, which people will have to adjust to, is, will I have one data set? So if you have children where you'll be using engagement steps with, so children below P4 and the progression steps or primary steps, you're going to have 2 data sets. So historically, when we've had P levels and levels, we've had one data set for all children. So wherever that child is working from P1 all the way up to level 5, we have had one graph, one scale, and ability to put the average of all pupils on one graph, which means you can do whole school data. What you won't be able to do from September onwards is do one graph showing whole school data. You'll have to split it into those working on progression steps or primary steps and those working on engagement steps. So that will just take a while for everyone to get used to and think about how that's going to impact going forward. Are the new frameworks in CSAM? Not quite yet. This will arrive in the autumn term, although my colleague John was telling me hopefully we'll get that out sooner, but it will be there sort of towards the autumn term. So as soon as we get those frameworks turned on in the autumn term and you can start using it, we'll shortly have the CSAM available. Will I have historic data in the new frameworks? So one of the things everyone wants is that historic data showing the past data, looking at 3 years worth of data. Is going forward, you will have that cutoff point. So you'll have your P levels and your national curriculum data up to the summer 2018, and you'll have your new engagement steps and progression steps data going forward. There's going to be no way of merging it because the levels are too different, the standards too different. And in theory, you could work back all the back data in the new frameworks. There wouldn't really be a benefit. It'll be a lot of work, and generally no one would be expecting it. I think everyone's at the point where they're now understanding the data is going to stop and data is going to start. So there would be no real benefit of having that historic data in the new framework. Next one, does Eversense work with the new assessment frameworks? Yes, it does. So if you're using Eversense, progression steps, primary steps, and engagement steps ought to already appear in those, so you can get using that straight away. One you may not notice till you start using it, we have combined the expressive and receptive communication. So within English, in the P levels, currently you have expressive communication speaking, receptive listening. So currently they're 2 strands, and then they combine at level 1 or step 1, year 1 into just spoken language. With the new framework, we have combined it into just one, so it is spoken language all the way through, which makes life easier. The reason for that is because we're going to do a separate communication interaction in 2019. There'll be a lot of duplication. So the spoken language allows us to focus on the area of English and the verbal communication that the government likes you to have, whereas the communication interaction, we can look at different types of communication and not just the English aspect of it. It was actually communicating for purpose, requiring needs, preferences, all the different stuff going through, and the different forms of communication. Where will the impact be? So over the last sort of 6 months, we've been to lots of schools, we've shown the progression steps and the primary steps, and what everyone's liked is the fact it doesn't change a huge amount. So when you're in the software, you're still going to go to individual assessments, you'll pick your group, your pupil, you'll be picking progression steps instead of national curriculum P levels, but you'll still pick English, you'll pick reading, and then the next box down where you're choosing the level, that is the box that will change. But the way you work, everything about what you're doing day to day will be exactly the same. It's just the size of the level and some of the areas are changing. But generally, day to day, it is pretty easy to take on, not a huge change. It's just you changing that language from saying he's a P6 child to he's a step 3 child. So there's going to be that impact within the school, but the biggest impact will be communicating with everyone else. So currently we've all got universal language. School A can talk to school B all the way through to Z, talking about P levels, and you will have that common understanding going forward. That P level language is going to slowly disappear. We're already working with teachers who've never worked on levels, and that's only taken 4 years to come about. So when we refer to levels, we're getting teachers who look at us blankly. So it'll be how long till P levels go in that sort of way. So it's that question of how will you communicate with parents, the other schools you work with in your cluster or your MATs, how will you work with your advisors, your local authority and other professionals, what language will you use to say where that child is working? Are they going to be open to it, or are they going to be still giving you forms asking for what P level they're on? And you may have to go through that process of not only training your staff inside the school, but training all the different people you work with and educating them on all the changes going forward. So if you're using engagement steps, again, there's going to be a big change to how you assess. So currently, for pupils working on P1 to P3-2, you're assessing your reading, your maths, your writing, all those sorts of stuff. But with the engagement steps, you're not going to be doing any of that. You'll be looking at their responsiveness, their anticipation, their curiosity, their in communication, their emotional affection, their social. It's a very different way of assessing, and also moving away from a level at a time to a much bigger breadth So looking at 4 or 5 different levels at a time, not just one. So it's going to be a very different way of working and assessing. One of the schools I talked to recently said it's quite a lot of work involved, because you can build such a detailed profile, but it gives a much better understanding of that child's needs, where they are, and what those next steps will look like. So yeah, engagement steps, there is a big change. And what I like about all the changes going on at the moment is freedom is often scary, but with the engagements, I really like the freedom, because schools can now assess in a way that suits them and their children's needs, rather than having to fit in with the assessment of English, maths, science, and so on. And just to repeat, when will the B squared have the other areas of need available? We're working on other areas over the next month. We've already started on a lot of it, and they'll be available from 2019. Hopefully, as we get towards the autumn term, we can start giving more specific dates on when they'll be released. But at the moment, it will be just saying from 2019. So what information can transfer? So all information recorded on an assessment point is automatically transferred. So achievements, comments, and if you use Eversense, the evidence itself. So that means all of that is there, and it's there the moment you turn on the new framework. So there's nothing to do, it's automatically there the moment you turn it on. Just like if you assess something in spoken language and it appears in PSS sheet, it's transferred, it's done exactly the same way. Completed levels, or the current level, will be transferred as part of the transition process. So we won't be going back in time, we'll just be transferring their current level over to the new system. So we'll use that their previously completed level and transfer that over. So this is the important part, what information does not transfer. So as we've changed how some of the subjects are organised, this will affect what completed levels we can transfer. So some of these we'll be able to transfer. So with spoken language, as we've combined it, my colleague John has created some code which will work out between speaking, expressive, listening, receptive, and spoken language, which is their correct level. And also with measurement and geometry, we've done the same there. But there are 3 areas you will need to re-baseline. So if you're using progression steps going forward, what we've done with science is we have changed it from having the 16 areas, we've changed it to having 3. So we've now got biology, chemistry, and physics. But within those 3 areas, we've got the 16 areas from the primary curriculum as headings underneath. So you still have the 16 areas, but it's now organized into 3 overall areas, which should make ongoing data a lot easier and more consistent. But as it's 3 overall areas, you will need to baseline science, PE. So we've narrowed that down slightly, but it's allowed us to organise PE in the way the government have done the PE with the national curriculum. So that will have a lot of data transferred, but as we've reorganised it, it's not a simple transition. And the other one is foreign languages. So currently we have French, German, Spanish, Italian. What we found with a lot of schools, they don't use foreign languages, or they only do one at a time. So just to reduce our work and make life easier, we've just got one called foreign languages, and you can choose which subjects, which languages you'll use that with. And there are also some new subjects, areas which will need baselining. So within English, we've added in a spelling appendix, we've added a vocabulary, grammar, and punctuation appendix. We've added a brand new area, sex and relationship education to progression steps. And within maths, we've got the multiplication tables appendix. So they will need baselining, or you can leave them, it's all up to you. So how does the transformation happen? So how do we transfer that data? So going back to that grid earlier, if a child is working on P6, then we know P5 is complete. So we will take that completed P5, and as that is still within step 1, they're going to be working within step 1. For a child who's achieved P6, they're going to be working within step 2. So they'll have step 1 will be complete, and they'll be working on step 2. And for a child who's achieved 1B, they're working in step 4, therefore step 3 will be complete. So it is quite simple, quite easy. It does mean that a child working on P5 or P4 will end up on step 1, and a child working on 2C or 2B or 2.1 or 2.2 will end up on that step 5. So some pupils may appear to drop, but hopefully with the skills you transfer, the percentages won't drop too much. But it does give you a nice overview of how that transition will happen. In terms of the spoken language, just to explain what we're doing there, so we have 3 areas. So in the national curriculum, we've got the spoken language. In the P levels, we have the speaking expressive or the listening receptive. We've got a number of rules. So if they've got a baseline in spoken language, they must be on the national curriculum. If there's nothing in spoken language, there's just data. So we've got a number of rules. And what we will do is we will use the area with the lowest completed level. So if I've got a pupil working in the P levels and they've achieved P6 in speaking and they've achieved P7 in listening, then the lowest level is P6. So we'll use that P6 and that will give us, going back, achieving P6 will give us step 1 in spoken language, and they're working on step 2. Okay, so that's the kind of process we go through. So how to transfer to the new frameworks. First step is to check your data. Basically, if your data isn't good, if you haven't got baselines in, if where you think the child is working is not where the system is working, it's not going to transfer very well. The second step is to check your data, and the third step I've got is to check your data. When we went through the 2014 transition, we had a lot of schools, not a lot, we had a number of schools whose data wasn't great, which meant when we transitioned, they either had no data or it was very bad data. And garbage in is always going to be garbage out. So rather than diving in and transitioning as soon as possible, spend some time as a school checking through all your data. So you use either the level summary, or if you have CSAM, use the profile key date tracking grid just to have a look at their current levels. Do you have any children who are somehow on P1? Or do you have children who've made 7 levels progress? It's just have a look at your data, have a good check before you start that transition process. The real how to transfer, it is quite easy. It's not that many steps. So the first one is contact our support team. So drop us an email. You can either just email support@connectingsteps.com, or in Connecting Steps, you've got the question mark in the bottom right. If you click on that and type in something, you've got the option to send a message, or from our support site, you've got the send a message. So please contact us and let us know you want to transition. What we will then do is we will what's called recalculate all your data. So basically, there's a whole load of tables you don't know about with all calculated data, which makes CSAM work faster. And what we will do is we will empty out those tables and completely rebuild them from scratch. The only effect that will have on is while that's happening, you can't use CSAM and you can't export any assessment data. So we will do that. It may take up to 24 hours, depending on how many schools are asking us to do this. And when it's complete, we will let you know. What we will then ask you to do is run a process called confirm levels complete. So we'll tell you where to do that. It is quite simple. It is a button. You click on it. It will ask you a date. So you can put in that day's date and you click on go. What it does run in the background, but if you log out, the process does stop. Okay, so once you click on that button, stay logged in for 10 minutes just to allow that process to run in the background. So once you've run that and you've stayed logged in for a while, say 15, 20 minutes later, let us know. So reply to your ticket saying confirm levels complete has been done. Once we've got that, my colleagues John or Lisa, they will go through and transfer your completed level data over to the new frameworks. And when that's complete, they will reply saying your data has transferred. And a really important step is to turn off your old frameworks. So once you've done this transition, go into the assessment, go into the admin section. You'll be told how to do this at the time, and basically turn off all your old frameworks. What you don't want to do is find out in December that actually 3 of your teachers have been working on the P levels and national curriculum still. So that really won't make your data very good. So please make sure to prevent that from happening. As soon as you've done that transfer, turn off the old frameworks. The easiest way to check is when you go to individual assessments and you click on the drop down to choose the framework, the curriculums. If you see P levels and national curriculum, you've still got some of them turned off. So what you want to see in that drop down is just primary steps, progression steps, or engagement steps. We can transfer your data multiple times, but it is a big pain. So we'd rather do it once and get it right. So if you aren't sure of your data, you can make contact with us and ask us to have a look with you. We can help you check the data. But if we have to reconvert your data, it does give John and Lisa a lot of work to do, so we'd really avoid that happening. So yeah, any questions you've got, you can always give us a call or drop us a message. So just to summarize, we'll be ready to start transitioning schools, so we can start using it from the 11th, and we'll actually start transitioning you from the 16th. You can view the frameworks before you transition, so the moment you've purchased them, you can sign in, have a look at the new frameworks, and see how your data looks. Please check your data before you transition. So all achievement comments and evidence automatically transfer. That happens the moment you turn them on, and completed levels can be transferred through our transition process. And you'll need to start the transition process when you are ready and when you want it to happen. And then based on the subjects where the completed levels have not transferred, so science, PE, and foreign languages, and baseline the new areas, and then support your staff to understand the new leveling structure. So that's going to be the big one. That's going to be the one moving away from they're working at P5 or P6 or level 2 to the new steps system. So on the in the sidebar, so I'm going to bring my one on here. You will see down here there's a section which says handouts, and you have 5 handouts. Okay, so please download them. Hopefully you'll find them really useful. So the first one is the B-squared transitioning guide. So basically some of the main key bits of information from this webinar are in there for you to go away and use. So please read that. The next one is the B-squared framework comparison chart. So I'm just going to actually bring that up for you to look at, so you can see how it looks, as I think that you'll find this really useful. So it's a nice single A4 page. So you can see on the left we have the P levels and national curriculum levels. We then have our engagement steps. We then have our progression steps, and then we have our primary steps. So when someone tells you the child is at level 3, you can see they're going to be working on progression step 7 or 6. Or if you're using progression step 3 as your language and someone's not quite up to speed, they can see you actually mean P8 in old language, which will hopefully. So this is going to take a while for everyone to get used to, and please print this out as much as possible and give to your staff. Technically save trees, email to your staff that guide, so that will help them get used to the new language. Then we have the engagement steps guide. So there's a document introducing engagement steps, how different it is, how you're going to use it, the different areas, what the different areas are. Then there's a guide to progression steps, talking about the different areas, what we've done, why we've done it, and the same for primary steps. So please feel free to download those and use those. So what are the next steps for you? So share this webinar with your colleagues. So anyone who's involved with the assessment or subject leaders or anything like that, it's worth them understanding what the difference is, what the process is, and what's going to happen going forward. Get ready. So take a look at the new assessment frameworks, understand the new levels, and decide when to transition. So you can do that starting on the 16th of July. If you're going to use multiple frameworks, if you're going to be using engagement steps and progression steps, it's worth deciding which pupils will be on which framework. It's not a set in stone thing. You can change your mind, but it is something to think about first, which ones will be in engagement steps and which ones will be in progression steps. Then it's transition to the new assessment frameworks. So that's the process we've gone through. And the big bit to remember at the end is turn off the old assessment frameworks. Make sure no one's entering it in the wrong place. And as I said in the last webinar on this area, this is the biggest change to assessment for pupils with SEND for over 15 years. So P-levels have been here for a very long time, and now they're going. So it's a big change and lots to think about and get used to. So that's the end of the overall presentation. So next is the Q&A session. So thank you for attending the webinar. As you end, there is a short survey. Please complete that now, or you will get an email asking you to complete it in later. If you have more questions which you can't answer here, or you want more information, you can arrange a meeting. So we do online meetings. So if you go to www.connectingsteps.com/meetings, you have my availability and John's availability, and you can arrange a meeting to suit you. If you do have any questions, on the left, you've got the questions box. So do please type out any questions you have, and I can answer those as you fire them across. So once again, thank you for attending. I hope it's been useful. I hope everything makes sense, and I hope we're making life easier for you as much as possible. So, any questions? If you prefer to ask using your microphone instead of typing, you can raise your hand. So there is a raise a hand feature which will allow you to let me know you have a question, and I can unmute your microphone and you can ask your question. Can I ever go back to my old frameworks to take a look? While you're transitioning, you can always look at them side by side. Even when you transition, those frameworks will exist forever. So they're your frameworks. You've purchased them from us. We won't remove them. And what you'll also find that as you work on the new frameworks, any skills that are in the old framework, it will actually take the data back. So yes, you can look at them whenever you need to, if you ever need to. If you ever need to pull out data next year on the previous year, you can pull that information out. I'm presuming by the lack of questions, hopefully all of you are happy and it all makes sense and you can't wait to dive in on the new frameworks. Or that, or you're all looking forward to the summer holiday and getting out of school, one or the other. Emily's got a question. I'm just going to unmute your microphone, Emily. So ask away.
I'm just wondering where levels are a little bit too generous, and where we want to, would we have to re-baseline completely if we want to, if we feel that, or is there a straightforward way of doing this? Or it's a bit of a problem for me. I think some of the staff have perhaps been a little bit over generous, and
hopefully. So I'm just going to dive back in. So what you'll see from this slide is lots of the levels. So if they're most of the way through P7, they're going to go back to being on step 2 somewhere. So some of them, so if they're working on P8, they will be on level 3, on step 3. If they have been over generous, it might be one of the things to bring that back in line before you transfer. Unless that is the current teacher, in which case you may want to ask the next teacher to do that. But the good thing is everyone knows this September all data is going to go out the window, as it were. So it's kind of one of those times as you can use this as a time to fix your data, bring pupils down and do all those sorts of things, because everyone knows that everyone's data is changing.
Okay, so it's about looking at the current data and then
one of the things
out those ones that people.
I know one school where they're not confident in how they've used it previously, so it's not being consistent, and there's various things, and they're trying to get a much better system going. So I know one school who aren't actually going to transition, they kind of start again. So you do have that option. It's a braver effort, there will be more work, but it is an option. Yeah, it comes down to how far out it is, would be my answer. So I've been to some schools who haven't used it hardly at all, and some teachers haven't logged in for almost a year with minimal data entered, and for those, yeah, it might be a lot of work. One of the things you can do is you're saying you can arrange an online meeting, and we can go through stuff with you. So we can look more in depth at sort of your area and go through your sort of situation. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, I'm just going to mute you again. If you do have a question, please stick your hand up again. So I've also been asked, can you confirm that you'll be able to transfer our data from levels into the primary steps? Yes, so my colleague John has been working on that. So he's been not only doing it from P levels to steps, but also doing the P levels and levels to years. So a lot of schools in primary have used steps that are current levels and P levels want to transition over to the primary steps. It will do that same conversion for you. So yeah, you can do that. Next question is, will pupils still work their way through the steps, which will allow senior staff to analyse the percentage of progress completed during the academic year? Yes, so call it a level, call it a year, call it a step. It's just the same thing by a different name. So they're still going to work through those steps. The thing we've been looking at over the last couple of years is we've been looking more ways of non-linear progress. So a child who may be working on step 5, but also aspects of step 6, how we can incorporate the progress they're making in step 6 into looking at their progress rather than ignoring it because they haven't achieved step 5 yet. So they will still work through the steps, but we're trying to do stuff in more non-linear ways. So where children have strengths and weaknesses, it's not preventing them from making progress in the traditional way. So that often limits the progress. So we're trying to find new ways of showing progress that shows that children are making progress, just not, I always say, where the government likes them to make. So yes, you can analyse the data through the CSAM and show the progress during the years, and the information we'll produce in September will give you an idea of the sort of the rates of progress you can expect for children working on different steps. So cool, you're welcome. Will primary steps come up as years or levels? So for those using the 2014 curriculum, you would have seen the option to choose between the levels or years. With the new frameworks, we're moving away from that, so everything will come under the levels frameworks. If you have no idea what I'm on about, it's one of those things that you won't have to worry about. We can support you with. But if you are currently using our years frameworks, you will need to switch over to levels and primary steps. Although years-based will be under levels, it just makes our life easier going forward as we change how we do things. Does anyone else have their hand up? No. So, does anyone have any more questions? So just been asked who in the school has to request the baseline. What we will do is when you request the baseline, we will check you're an administrator. So it'll only be the administrators who can request the transition. We want to make sure that it's everyone in the school knows that the transition is happening, not it's one person doing it and everyone else isn't aware. So we will be checking those sorts of things that come in. So we'll try and help you manage that transition, and we may have questions that you haven't thought of yet to ask and just give you some guidance to make sure this happens as smoothly as possible. You're welcome. Cool. So I'm just going to zoom away to the end. So almost there. So yeah, if you do want to contact me, if you have any more questions on transitioning, you can drop me an email. So you've got my email address in the bottom right, and you have our phone number. Pretty busy at the moment, out on the road, seeing lots of schools. So it will be quite hard to get hold of me on the phone. But if you drop me an email, I will get back to you as soon as possible, or you can talk to my colleague, John. But unless I'm going to leave another minute for questions, so I'm just going to go off the webcam so I can have a drink without everyone staring at me. So I'm just going to turn the webcam off, but I am still here. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask. But if no questions come in, I will be ending the meeting or the webinar shortly. Cool. So as there are no more questions, once again, thank you all for coming. Thank you for coming to the webinar. Thank you for using B Squared products. We will be emailing out the video approximately 24 hours time, and we'll also be putting in our blog tomorrow at some point along with all these handouts. So if you haven't downloaded the handouts, it won't be too late at the end, is you can always download them off our blog where this webinar will be. If you've not been to our blog, so on the B Squared website, right at the top, second item along, we've got blog. And what we do, all the different webinars we do, we put up here, so you can watch them whenever you're ready. And that includes the free monthly training webinar we run. So if you've got staff who are new to the school and haven't used B Squared before, you can send them to watch that. So it runs every month, and the next one will be on the 11th September. So please feel free to register for that. So once again, thank you for coming, and good evening. Goodbye. Thank you.